I always thought I had a perfect life. My wife, Sarah, and I had been married for 6 years. We were that couple that friends envied. A nice house, decent jobs, and the kind of laughter that echoed in the walls of our home. I loved her fiercely, and I was proud to call her my partner. But as I learned the hard way, sometimes the picture-perfect facade hides a stark reality. Things began to change subtly. At first, I chalked it up to stress at work or perhaps just the monotony of married life. Sarah, once full of energy and life, started coming home late from her job as a marketing executive. Her stories about working late began to sound rehearsed, and I'd noticed little things. A new perfume that smelled different from the one I had bought her, and the way her gaze seemed to linger on her phone more than on me. I ignored that gnawing feeling in my gut for far too long, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. But then it became impossible to ignore. One evening, while I was doing laundry, I stumbled upon an old hotel receipt hidden in the pocket of her blazer. The name on the receipt wasn't mine. It was for a weekend stay at a place I had never heard of, a boutique hotel in the city. The date of the stay coincided suspiciously with a weekend when Sarah had claimed she was going to a friend's bachelorette party, a friend who didn't exist as far as I could tell. I confronted her that night with my heart pounding in my chest. I was terrified of what her reaction might be, but I knew I couldn't bury my head in the sand anymore. When I asked her about the receipt, her face morphed from surprise to anger, and she began to spin a web of lies that would make anyone feel dizzy. She insisted it was a business trip, that she had to stay overnight because the company was hosting a client. "Why didn't you tell me?" I pressed, my voice shaking. "Because I didn't think it was important. You know how it is, work takes over sometimes. You always say I work too hard." Her justification was weak, and as I looked into her eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. I saw guilt, but more than that, I saw contempt. The confrontation spiraled into a vicious cycle of denial and accusations. I demanded honesty, but all I got were half-hearted explanations and more lies. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I knew she was hiding something darker, something that went beyond just a late-night work trip. The shock and betrayal felt like a punch to my gut, leaving me breathless as I tried to process her words, or lack thereof. I wanted to scream, to throw the receipts in her face and demand she come clean about the truth. But instead, I felt tears welling up and anger took over. The realization that the woman I loved had not only betrayed me but had crafted an elaborate deceit made my blood boil. I stormed out of the house, needing to clear my mind and figure out what to do next. As I drove aimlessly, I wrestled with my feelings. How could she do this to me? Our life together, our love, was it all a lie? The confusion mixed with an overwhelming sense of loss. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into a chasm of dark uncertainty. As the shock wore off, anger started to rise. I thought about how I could turn this situation around. I wasn't going to let her see my pain. I would show her that I could be happy without her. That's when I made a decision. I wouldn't just sit back and let this betrayal define me. I was going to take the reins back in my life, starting with a vacation. Just me. That would be my escape, my chance to breathe and rediscover who I was before I became her husband. I would make sure she saw me happy, living my life to the fullest while she wallowed in her deceit. I wasn't just going to be the victim. I was going to be the one who thrived despite her betrayal. And so, with a plan starting to form in my mind, I set the car towards a travel agency I had seen downtown. I would take that first step towards my newfound freedom. Little did she know what was coming. I was about to turn my heartbreak into something powerful, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. The road ahead was uncertain, but I felt a flicker of excitement. This was just the beginning. I walked into that travel agency with a mix of determination and nervous energy. The bright colors of the posters advertising exotic locations caught my eye, but my mind was elsewhere. I was already picturing the freedom that awaited me. The agent at the front desk, a cheerful woman named Lisa, greeted me with a smile. I could see her professionalism shining through, and I knew I was in good hands. As I explained that I wanted to book a solo vacation, Lisa raised an eyebrow, intrigued. She clearly didn't see many men coming in alone. But I didn't care. I was there for myself, and I was ready to embrace it. I rattled off a few destinations I had always wanted to explore. Bali, Italy, maybe a road trip through the national parks. I wanted to go somewhere I could soak in the sun and forget about the heartbreak back home. Lisa began to pull up options on her computer, and I found myself getting lost in the possibilities. I could see myself lounging on a beach, sipping a cocktail, and letting the warm breeze wash away my troubles. It was liberating to think I could choose my itinerary, my adventures, and my experiences, all without the weight of Sarah's lies hanging over me. After a lengthy discussion, we settled on a week-long trip to the Amalfi Coast in Italy. The thought of bright cliffs, delicious food, and stunning views filled me with a sense of anticipation. As I signed the paperwork, I felt as if I were shedding the old me, the one who had been loyal and trusting, the one who had been deceived. I was stepping into a new chapter in my life, and it felt exhilarating. The next few days were a blur. I focused on preparing for my trip, throwing myself into planning the little details like where to eat and what to see. I booked the flights and the hotel, and with each step, the excitement grew. I started to think about how I could share bits of my journey with Sarah, just enough to let her know I was moving on without her. I wasn't doing this to hurt her, but I wanted her to see that I was thriving despite the betrayal. The day of my departure finally arrived, and I could hardly contain my excitement as I packed my bags. I made sure to select clothes that made me feel confident and attractive. I wanted to look good for myself, but I also wanted Sarah to feel that pang of regret when she saw the posts I would certainly share online. As I boarded the flight, I felt a mix of emotions. There was still a shadow of sadness that lingered. After all, I had loved Sarah fiercely. But I pushed that aside, focusing instead on the adventure ahead. I spent the flight scrolling through travel blogs, gathering tips on hidden gems in Amalfi. I was ready to explore, to live, and to rediscover myself. When I landed, the air was filled with the scent of the sea and citrus. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my skin. I checked into my hotel, a quaint little place perched on a hillside. The view from my balcony was breathtaking, with sparkling blue waters stretching into the horizon. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of freedom wash over me. This was my time, and I was going to embrace it fully. As I explored the charming towns of Positano and Ravello, I found myself filled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this opportunity. I wandered through narrow streets lined with colorful buildings, tasted fresh pasta, and laughed with locals. I took pictures of the stunning landscapes, capturing the moments that reminded me I was alive and free. I shared snippets of my journey on social media, posting photos of beautiful sunsets and delicious meals. I tagged Sarah in a few of the posts, knowing she'd see them. I wanted her to know I was happy and that life was continuing without her. I could almost picture her scrolling through her feed, her expression shifting from indifference to a hint of regret. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. But as the days passed, I realized that while I was enjoying my newfound freedom, the pain of betrayal still lingered. I would occasionally catch myself thinking of Sarah, remembering the good times we shared, how we used to dream about traveling together. Those memories, although tinted with sadness, were a reminder of how much I had given to the relationship. I started to understand that my journey wasn't just about escaping the hurt. It was also about finding closure. Each day in Italy brought me closer to acceptance. I learned to cherish the experiences that were solely my own, and I began to realize the importance of self-love and independence. I was reclaiming my identity, and I was determined to become the best version of myself. By the time my week in Italy was coming to an end, I felt lighter, more empowered. I had gone from a place of betrayal to a journey of self-discovery. I had ventured into the unknown and emerged stronger. I was ready to return home, not as the man Sarah had deceived, but as someone who had found his way back to happiness and fulfillment. I was finally ready to close that chapter and look forward to whatever came next, whether that meant moving on from Sarah entirely or finding a way to redefine our relationship. But first, I had to make my way back home, and I knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The conversation with Sarah loomed over me like a storm cloud. I had my strength, but I also had a lot of decisions to make. Would I confront her again? Would I be able to forgive her? All I knew was that I had changed, and I needed her to see that. The flight back home felt significantly different from the one I had taken to Italy. Instead of the excitement of an adventure ahead, I was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. My mind buzzed with thoughts of everything I had experienced during my week away. The beauty of the Amalfi Coast had rejuvenated my spirit, but now I was returning to the reality of my life, the betrayal that had shattered my trust in Sarah. As I walked through the front door of our home, memories rushed back, both good and bad. It felt surreal to be back, and I stood there for a moment, my suitcase at my feet, taking it all in. Would Sarah even be home? The house was eerily quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being a stranger in my own space. Just then, I heard the familiar sound of the shower running. I felt a pang of frustration. It was a reminder of how normal things had once been. But I brushed that aside. Instead, I started unpacking my suitcase, feeling a sense of purpose. I had returned as a different man, and it was time for Sarah to see that. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and her hair damp, I was struck by how vulnerable she looked. For a moment, the anger that had been bubbling inside me subsided, but then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, and I steeled myself. "Hey," she said, her eyes narrowing as they fell on my suitcase. "You're back already?" "Yeah, just got in," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I could feel the tension hanging thick in the air, and I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the elephant in the room. "Did you have a good time?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. I could sense her trying to gauge my mood, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Let's talk," I said, cutting straight to the chase. Her expression shifted from curious to guarded, and I could see her mentally preparing for the confrontation. "Talk about what?" I took a deep breath, the weight of everything I wanted to say pressing down on me. "About us, about what happened while I was away." "I don't know what you mean," she replied, her voice faltering, but I held my ground. "Cut the crap, Sarah. I found the hotel receipt. I know you were lying about your trip. It's time to come clean." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw panic flicker across her face. "I told you it was for work. I can explain." I wasn't interested in her explanations. I had heard too many already, and I knew they were just more lies. "No, you can't. You've had the chance to explain yourself, and you've chosen to keep lying to me." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she stared at me, tears pooling in her eyes. "Please just let me explain," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Explain what, Sarah? How you chose to cheat on me with someone you hired to help us travel? How you used my trust against me?" The hurt in my voice was palpable, and I could feel the anger starting to bubble up again. I I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered. "I just got caught up in the moment. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated incredulously. "A mistake is spilling coffee on my shirt. This was a choice. You chose to betray me." The hurt in my voice was sharp, and I could see it cutting her. I know, I'm so sorry. I love you. It was a fling. It meant nothing." She pleaded, stepping closer to me as if she could bridge the chasm that had formed between us with her proximity. "But it meant everything to me, Sarah, everything. You turned our marriage into a joke." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, a mix of anger and sorrow. "You said you loved me, and you went and did this. How can you expect me to believe anything you say anymore?" "I'll do anything to fix this. Just give me a chance," she said, desperation etched across her face. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," I admitted, my voice breaking. "You've shattered that trust, and I don't know how to rebuild it." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. We stood there, staring at each other, both of grappling with our emotions. I could see she was truly remorseful, but the damage had been done. "I need time," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. "I can't just forgive and forget. I need to figure out what I want, what I deserve. Please don't leave me," she begged, her tears spilling over. "I'll do anything. I'll change, I swear." I shook my head, feeling torn. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part was done trying to save this relationship. "I need space to think. I can't keep doing this." With that, I turned away from her. I felt like I was ripping off a Band-Aid, exposing a wound that had yet to heal. I stepped into the living room and sank onto the couch, my heart racing. The confrontation had been brutal, but I knew it was necessary. I could feel the weight of the decision I had to make pressing down on me. The love I had felt for Sarah was buried beneath the betrayal, and I had to navigate these complex emotions carefully. I needed to reflect on what I wanted my future to look like, whether it included Sarah or not. As I sat there, I realized that my journey was far from over. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but now I had to figure out what that life would be without her, and that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had to decide if I would allow her back into my heart or if it was time to close that door for good. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to find my way through it. The question remained, could I forgive her, or was this truly the end? The next few days passed in a haze. I tried to focus on my daily routine, work, errands, and the mundane tasks that kept me grounded, but the reality of my situation loomed over me like a dark cloud. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and even moments of nostalgia for the happier times Sarah and I had shared. But with every memory that flickered through my mind, I was reminded of the betrayal that had eclipsed it all. Sarah tried to reach out to me, sending texts and leaving voicemails, words of love mixed with apologies and desperate pleas for understanding. She even attempted to engage me in small talk about our favorite shows and the mundane details of our lives, but I had put up walls around my heart. I was torn between the love I once felt for her and the anger that simmered just beneath the surface. One night, as I lay in bed, I could hear her quietly crying in the next room. The sound pierced through my heart, but also ignited the anger that had been festering. How could she cry after what she had done? Didn't she understand the pain she had caused? I felt trapped in a cycle of emotions, one moment wanting to comfort her, the next wanting to push her away entirely. It became clear I needed to find my own clarity amidst this emotional turmoil. I turned to friends for support, sharing what had happened. They were shocked at the details, rallying around me with their love and encouragement. I felt grateful for their empathy, but their anger towards Sarah only fueled my own, planting seeds of doubt about whether I should even consider reconciliation. Then one evening, I made the decision to go out with a couple of close friends, hopping to clear my head. We went to a nearby bar that had a relaxed vibe, and I found comfort in the laughter and camaraderie. As I sipped my drink, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. I shared my story, and they listened intently, offering advice and support. It felt good to talk about it openly, to release some of the burden I had been carrying alone. After a few rounds, I started to feel more like myself. The laughter and banter with my friends reminded me that life could still be enjoyable. I knew deep down that I needed to focus on my own happiness rather than getting mired in the past. But just as I began to feel a sense of relief, a familiar face walked into the bar. It was Lisa, the travel agent who had helped me plan my trip to Italy. She spotted me and waved, a warm smile lighting up her face. As she made her way over, I felt a strange mix of surprise and comfort. Perhaps I was still craving connection, and here was someone who represented my newfound freedom. "Hey, fancy seeing you here," she said, taking a seat at our table. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, a genuine smile breaking through my earlier tension. "Just what I needed." We talked about my adventures in Italy, and as I shared my experiences, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in days. Lisa was easy to talk to, and her enthusiasm was infectious. She listened intently, laughing at my stories and offering suggestions for future travels. I found myself relaxing, forgetting about the hurt that had been consuming me only hours before. As the night wore on, I could feel the chemistry between us growing. We shared a few drinks, and I began to flirt back, enjoying the attention I hadn't allowed myself to seek in a long time. It felt exhilarating to connect with someone again, to have someone genuinely interested in me without the baggage of betrayal hanging over us. The evening ended with a promise to keep in touch, and as I walked home, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe there were brighter days ahead. Perhaps this was the push I needed to finally let go of the past. I knew I wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship, but the possibility of a connection, however casual, felt freeing. When I got home, Sarah was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes pleading and tired. "You're back late," she said softly, her voice laced with concern. Yeah, just went out with friends, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. You're okay, right? She asked, her expression earnest. I'm figuring things out, Sarah, I said, my voice steady. But I need you to understand that I can't just forget about what happened. I know, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. I'll do anything to make it right. I miss you. I miss us. Her words struck a nerve, and for a moment I felt the pull of longing, but I quickly reminded myself of the heartbreak she had caused. I need space to think about what I want, and honestly, I don't know if I can forgive you or if I even want to try. Please, just give me a chance. I'll show you I can change, she pleaded, desperation evident in her voice. We both need time. I replied, feeling a sense of resolve. I need to focus on myself and what makes me happy. With that, I turned away, my heart heavy yet resolute. I needed to prioritize my own well-being, and I was finally starting to remember who I was beyond being Sarah's husband. The road ahead was still unclear, but I was determined to carve a path that was mine alone. As I lay in bed that night, the thought of Lisa lingered in my mind. It was a reminder that life could still bring joy, that I was still capable of feeling alive despite the pain. I closed my eyes, letting hope seep in as I fell into a fitful sleep, the promise of brighter days guiding me through the darkness. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing I had the power to shape my future. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions as I navigated my new reality. I focused on my work, throwing myself into projects and trying to regain a sense of normalcy. But the shadow of Sarah's betrayal still loomed, and I knew I couldn't avoid addressing our situation forever. I had taken steps toward reclaiming my life, but one nagging thought persisted. Was it time to fully confront the future of our relationship? During this period, I began to see a therapist. At first, it felt strange to open up to a stranger about my feelings, but it quickly became a safe space for me to explore my emotions without judgment. My therapist helped me articulate my feelings of anger, sadness, and confusion. She encouraged me to lay bare my thoughts about Sarah and the trust that had been shattered. Do you think you can forgive her? She asked one afternoon, her gaze steady and thoughtful. I don't know, I replied honestly, feeling the weight of the question. Part of me wants to believe that people can change, but another part of me feels like this is a betrayal I can't get over. You have every right to feel that way, she said gently. Trust is difficult to rebuild once it's been broken, but understanding your feelings will help you decide what you want for your future. Those sessions became invaluable as I began to unpack the complexities of my emotions. I sometimes found myself thinking about how Sarah had once been my confidant, the person I had built my life with. But now, the foundation of that life felt cracked and unstable. Around the same time, I had kept in touch with Lisa from the travel agency. We exchanged messages about places I wanted to visit, and our conversations had shifted from casual to something more personal. I found myself looking forward to her messages. It felt refreshing to engage with someone who was genuinely interested in my life without any hidden motives. One Friday evening, after a long week at work, I decided to text Lisa, suggesting we grab dinner. To my surprise, she instantly agreed, and we set a date for the following weekend. I was excited and nervous all at once. I felt a twinge of guilt about the budding connection with Lisa, but I quickly brushed it aside. I was still in the process of figuring things out, and I wasn't ready to commit to anything serious. The dinner with Lisa went incredibly well. We met at an Italian restaurant, and as soon as I saw her, I felt a spark of joy. Her laughter was infectious, and we quickly fell into easy conversation as if we were old friends. I shared stories about my travels, my hopes for the future, and even touched on my recent heartbreak. I appreciated her genuine interest, and the more we talked, the more I felt a connection blossoming between us. As the evening progressed, we ended up sharing dessert, and I caught her gaze lingering on me a little too long. The chemistry was undeniable, and for the first time in weeks, I felt alive. It was intoxicating to enjoy someone's company without the weight of past disappointments. When she reached across the table to touch my hand, I felt a rush of warmth. I'm really glad you reached out, Lisa said softly, her voice sincere. It's nice to spend time with someone who's open to new experiences. Same here, I replied, feeling something shift within me. It's refreshing to meet someone who's not entangled in baggage. In that moment, I realized I was beginning to move forward and it felt exhilarating. The dinner turned into a series of more meetings, each one deepening our connection. Lisa was adventurous and curious, and I found myself drawn to her spirit. It was a stark contrast to the heaviness I had felt with Sarah. I felt as though I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under sadness and betrayal. Meanwhile, Sarah had been trying to keep the lines of communication open. I could see she was genuinely making an effort, cooking my favorite meals, texting me throughout the day, and even offering to help with household chores. But while part of me appreciated the gestures, another part felt overwhelmed. I didn't want to be swayed by her attempts to win me back. I still needed time to process everything without being pulled back into old patterns. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through messages from both Sarah and Lisa. It was a surreal moment. Part of me missed the familiarity of Sarah's presence, while another part of me relished the excitement of my new connection with Lisa. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, and I needed to make a decision. That's when I knew I had to confront Sarah. I couldn't keep living in limbo. I needed to articulate where I stood with her and what my intentions were moving forward. I had been wrestling with the idea of whether I wanted to try to rebuild our relationship or if it was time to end things for good. The next day, I arranged to meet her at our favorite coffee shop. As I sat there, waiting for her, my heart raced. I knew this conversation would be one of the most difficult I'd ever had. When she arrived, I could see the hope in her eyes, and as we sat down, I felt an urge to soften my words. But I knew I had to be honest. "Sarah, I'm glad we could talk," I began, my voice steady but gentle. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us and what happened. I need you to know that while I appreciate your efforts to reconnect, I'm still struggling with the hurt you caused." "I understand," she replied, her expression shifting from hopeful to concerned. "I want to make things right. I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." "Love isn't enough if there's no trust," I said. "I want to be clear. I can't just jump back into this relationship without addressing what happened. I need to know if you're truly committed to changing, to being honest with me moving forward." "I swear I am," she said earnestly. "I've been reflecting on my actions and how they impacted us. I know I messed up and I regret it every single day." "Regret isn't enough," I replied, my heart heavy. "I need time to determine if I can truly forgive you. I've also started seeing someone else, someone who isn't tied to our past." The words hung in the air, and I watched as shock and hurt washed over her face. I felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself that I had to be honest about where I stood. "I'm trying to figure out what I want, and right now, I'm not sure if that includes you," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I need space to explore that." Tears filled her eyes as she looked away, struggling to compose herself. "I understand if you need space. I just hope you know how much you mean to me. I still care about you, Sarah, but I can't ignore the reality of what happened. I owe it to myself to explore what happiness looks like without the shadows of betrayal hanging over me." With that, I felt a weight lift as I finally articulated my feelings. It was a painful step, but it was necessary for both of us to find closure. I knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but I was ready to confront them and embrace whatever came next, whether that meant healing the relationship or letting it go for good. As I left the coffee shop, a sense of relief washed over me. I had taken a significant step forward, and while the future remained uncertain, I felt empowered to navigate it on my own terms. I was finally ready to embrace my journey, one step at a time. In the days that followed my conversation with Sarah, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I had set boundaries, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control over my life. I focused on my own well-being and began exploring new activities that brought me joy. I joined a local hiking group, took up painting classes, and even started volunteering at a nearby animal shelter. Each step allowed me to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Sarah. I also continued to see Lisa. Our connection deepened as we shared more about our lives, our hopes for the future, and our experiences. While I was still cautious about diving headfirst into a new relationship, I found comfort in spending time with someone who brought laughter and lightness into my life. It felt refreshing to share adventures again, but this time without the baggage of past heartaches. One Saturday afternoon, Lisa and I went for a hike in a nearby national park. The sun streamed through the trees, and I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in years. As we reached the summit, I took a moment to take in the breathtaking view. In that moment, I realized that I was finally starting to embrace life again. "This is incredible," I said, my heart racing with joy. "I can't believe I waited this long to do something like this." Lisa smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Life is too short to hold back. I'm glad you're out here living it." Her words resonated deeply with me. I had spent too long trapped in the shadows of betrayal and hurt. Now, I was choosing to step into the light, to embrace new experiences, and to allow myself the opportunity for happiness. As the weeks went by, I kept my distance from Sarah. She reached out occasionally, expressing her desire to talk and work through things, but I wasn't ready. I needed space to heal, and I needed to see if I could truly forgive her. Part of me still cared, but another part understood that sometimes love isn't enough to mend what's been broken. One evening, as I was sitting in my apartment, I received a call from Sarah. I took a deep breath before answering, knowing that this conversation could change everything. "Hey," she said, her voice shaky. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I replied cautiously. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop where we had our earlier conversation. As I walked in, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I was ready to face whatever she had to say, but I was also prepared to stand my ground. When Sarah arrived, she looked different. The weariness etched on her face suggested she had been reflecting deeply on our situation. We sat down and I could sense the heaviness in the air. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice soft. "I understand now how my actions hurt you and how much I took you for granted. I've been working on myself, going to therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm committed to making changes." I listened intently, curious about her growth but also guarded. "That's good to hear, but I need more than words, Sarah. I need to know that you truly understand the depth of the betrayal and that you're willing to do the work to rebuild that trust." "I am," she insisted. "I know it will take time and I'm willing to put in the effort. I miss you, and I want to be a better person for you, for us." Her sincerity struck a chord within me, but I wasn't ready to jump back into the relationship. "I appreciate you being honest with me," I responded carefully. "But I need to be clear. I can't go back to the way things were. I need time to see if I can truly forgive you and if this relationship can be rebuilt." "I understand," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'll give you as much time as you need. I just hope you can see how much I've changed." As we talked, I could see the depth of her remorse, and it stirred something within me. I wasn't ready to close the door entirely, but I also knew I couldn't rush back into things without fully processing my feelings. That night, I returned home with a heavy heart but also with hope. Perhaps there was a path forward, but it would require both of us to work hard to truly understand and rebuild what had been lost. In the weeks that followed, I continued to focus on my healing and self-discovery. I maintained open communication with Sarah, but I also leaned into my growing friendship with Lisa. It became a delicate balance as I navigated these new waters. Ultimately, I understood that relationships take work, but they also require trust and respect. I learned to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, knowing that I had the power to shape my future, whether that meant working on things with Sarah or embracing a new beginning with someone else. As I stood at that crossroads, I felt empowered. Life was full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I had learned that heartbreak could lead to growth, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is step into the unknown, ready to forge your own path. With every step I took, I knew I was moving toward a life filled with authenticity, joy, and the promise of new adventures. I had faced my heartbreak and transformed it into something powerful. I was finally ready to live for myself, and that made all the difference.